Welcome to Parc Ferm, the Canadian Formula One podcast.
That's P3. Okay, mate. Woo! Purple.
Hey, he's got on the podium. Who would have thought?
We talk race reviews, news from the paddock, and bring you everything from the world of Formula One.
And something to limit the problem. Congratulations.
Well, change your car. You've got a problem. Change your fucking car.
And you change your car because Checo has been saying the car is fucked.
And now your hosts, Drew, Walker, Ed, and Tomas.
Welcome back, everybody, to Parc Ferm, the Canadian Formula One podcast. We are here with myself, Drew, and my homeboy from the Lithuanian bunker, Tomas. What up?
What up?
Actually, it's just going to be the dynamic duo today. We have our homeboy Walker out in Austria doing all the Austrian things. And our homeboy Ed is unavailable at the moment, wishing his little man all the health. So let's get rolling here. We just came back from Spa. And Thomas, what did you think about the race, my dude?
The race was not really what I expected. I thought it was a pretty decent race overall. Spa being Spa, on qualifying, it rained. On the race day, we had a few drops as well. So yeah, not what I expected from the last couple years. Overall, was a decent race. I expected more action, to be honest. Wasn't enough action for me. This whole season is a little bit slow, I should say. Surprise, surprise, Max won yet again. Who would have thunk? And yeah, those are my thoughts, man. I was hoping for a more interesting race than that. What about you?
I'm with you 100%, dude. I was hoping for more. Was it a good race? You know what? Having Max start with the 5-place grid penalty gave me hope. I thought that like maybe something funky was going to happen. I knew like going into turn one that like maybe there might have been an opportunity for like, you know, Carlos Sainz to maybe crash into the back of him instead of Piastri, you know, something like that. But I followed Max very closely on the first 3 or 4 turns because that's when things get hectic. And, you know, he mentioned in an interview beforehand that like he just has to keep himself out of trouble for the first couple laps. And then he knew he was going to win the race. And I think everyone else did too, which brings me to my first point. Do you think everybody's just fucking bored with Formula One as it is with Max winning?
From my circle of friends that I speak to, and basically let's say 9 out of 10 of us agree that yeah, it's getting to that point where it's boring. There's no competition. It's Max, and you know, you're almost you're going into this race expecting, you know, something great, but in the back of your mind there's a 99% chance that Max is going to win, and so far that has been true. And it's boring. It honestly is boring to watch. Something has to give. Something has to change. I'm pretty sure you mentioned it last episode. You know, he has to have eventually an engine failure or a transmission failure or something. He just can't keep dominating, because he keeps on dominating like this. Formula One is gonna, in my opinion, is gonna lose a lot of fans, because it's just, I'm sorry, it's just not gonna be interesting to watch anymore. If you know you're winning a race by 3 or 4 seconds, that's one thing. But once you're 35 seconds, you know, from the second in the car, like, come on, like, it's not even a race. That's just killing it at this point.
I'm with you. Okay, let me ask you this question then. Do you think it is more or less boring than when Lewis Hamilton was just dominating?
Great question. Going back,
because he dominated for most of it too, right? Like, yeah. It was, I would say it was pretty fair as far as the domination's concerned, but like, you know, I was just getting into Formula One pretty heavy in like the 2014, 2015, which was like right in the middle towards the end. Well, yeah, I guess right in the middle of the Lewis Hamilton domination. But I still remember there being chances of things happening, right? Like I'm gonna put that out there to a couple of things. I'm assuming that it's because, you know, the the hybrid engines were still newer ish, and there was still a lot of like engine failures. There was a lot of things taking, the Mercedes out of the race for other reasons. But I think at this point that like all the constructors have just found, the right things. Is like there's not a lot of DNFs as far as the engine's concerned, Haas aside from that. But like for the most part, most of these guys are finishing the race if they're not crashing.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, like, it's one of those things that, like, now that the cars are indestructible virtually, and now that the engines aren't failing in any sort of fashion, like, when a team, and the team happens to be Red Bull now, when they start dominating, like, unless the FIA, in my opinion, steps in, I don't think that there's going to be enough closing of that gap to make Formula One entertaining for the fans again.
I agree. Going back to the beginning when Mercedes was dominating, yeah, I was getting tired of it too, and I was rooting for Max or Red Bull. Come on, let's win, something different. But now, as you said, they weren't dominating that crazily. Now Max is just on a whole new level, and he's just killing it. And you know what? It's impressive to a point, but this is too much. It's, again, like you said, there's no competition. The racers are competing for second, third, fourth, fifth. And no one's really competing for fifth anymore, or for first anymore. I'm sorry, but they deep down themselves know that Max is gonna win. And as you said, the engines got reliable, the gearboxes got reliable. Pirelli came out with new tire compounds. There's I don't think we had a single blowout or a random puncture. So everything's just getting better and better, and which is kind of good for the race. It keeps it more consistent, but it takes a little bit of action away. It takes that competing away as well. So I don't know. I think it's gonna, from the people that I speak to, even non-Formula F1 fans, they keep on saying that what's the point? I had a few people say, what's the point to watch it if Max is dominating and winning these races? And you know what? I can't argue with them. If I was new to the sport and coming into this and knowing, that Max won, and he won by pretty big margins, I probably have the same thought process and say, well, next race Max is going to win again. So what's the point of watching?
Yeah, like imagine if we were watching a hockey game and that every time a team stepped on the ice that they were going to win, and not just win by a lot, you'd stop watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like you totally stop watching it. I want to go back a little bit to Spa as a racetrack. Like I know there was a little bit of controversy going on, especially with like, when they're trying to fit more races into a calendar, and they want to make sure that the races that they do have in the calendar are the right ones. Spa came up into question of whether or not they're going to continue to race here. Recent tragedy that happened in another motor class at Spa recently. That's why I think personally the FIA was super diligent in taking them around, and like I felt like half of the race was it the race or the sprint race? It was a sprint race.
Sprint race.
That was like started under the safety car, rolling start, that kind of thing, and like I actually really enjoyed the sprint race. I thought it was a lot of fun, and to have that little lapse, knowing what was going on, I thought it was very interesting how the tires played into that, because they all started on the wet tires and they went around and around and around until the FIA decided like, okay, let's bring that safety car in, let's get these guys going. And immediately every single one of the teams had to pit at least one of their drivers. I thought it was going to be a mess in the pit lane, and it was a mess in the pit lane, and that was awesome. Oscar pitted really early, did well, came out first. I think he led for like 5 laps, which was 2 laps further than I thought he was going to lead for. Max, was biding his time. He knew it was going to happen eventually. And as that racing line dried up, he was screwed. No one could do anything about it. But I thought it was a super interesting play. And I guess my question to you is, A, what do you think is going to happen with the wet tires? And B, do you think that Spa has any future left in Formula One with what's happened there in the last couple of years?
I'm going to start off with B. I hope to God that Spa continues to be on the racetrack calendar. It's such a cool circuit in my opinion. It's probably one of my favorite circuits for sure. Just with elevation changes, just with the a little bit unpredictable weather. I love that circuit. As for the tire, what do you mean exactly? If the wet tire is going to still play a role?
Well, like if
well-
the race is too wet and you need the wet tire, they're virtually like stopping the race and using the safety car to go around. And then as soon as the track was dry enough, everybody just went into the pit lane immediately and jumped on the inners because it's a faster tire. So really, what's the wet tire for besides driving behind the safety car?
True. Good question in that. Especially what you mentioned, the tragedies that recently happened, the recent years, especially, and I think what was that last year, or the year before, where basically it rained the whole time, and essentially the race was canceled, and it just did one lap under a safety car with half points. That was ridiculous. What was the point of even doing that? You could just finished at the pit lane and no race at all. I hope the wet tire stays. I still think it has a key role to play in it. Safety speaking, I get it. Every human life is valuable. Every racer life is valuable. They're risking their lives out there. At the same time, these drivers are, as you put it, 20 of the best world drivers in the world. They know the risks. If it's like downpouring rain, safety car or stop the race for a little bit. But if it's raining, give us some time to race, try it out and see what happens, see how the drivers feel and get their feedback. So in short, I hope that tire stays, and I hope we see it a little bit more when it rains and it's just not a safety car and not a stop race, not a red flag.
Was it just me, or did you hope it rained on race day? Like when it started to spit a little bit?
I hoped it rained on race day. It would have been classic Spa. But at the same time, it was a little bit like, I hope it doesn't rain too much because I don't want a red flag for like an hour and a half and only half an hour racing. So yeah, that was, honestly speaking, that was a little bit disappointing that it didn't rain in my eyes.
I get you. I'm with you on that 100%. I think I was doing a little bit of a rain dance, and I remember them saying, I don't remember if it was to Lando or if it was to Hamilton, but I remember someone getting on the team radio saying that like at the other end of the track that it's starting to spit a little. And like, because Spa is so big, it's like a geographical footprint is huge, right? It's 7 kilometers long, longest course on the calendar. It's 100 meters and change in elevation from all the way around, right? I just thought it was very interesting to see all of them. And at that exact time, a lot of the drivers and teams running a certain tire strategy were just pitting for softs. And that's when they got the notice to rain. And I was doing every rain dance in my chair that I possibly could to get it to rain, because I think that would have put a buckle into the race that we needed to see just for some entertainment value. Because Max was in the lead by, I think, 18 seconds by this point, and it was just, it is what it is. Okay, question then to you. Big crash taking out our homeboy Oscar Piastri in the first corner by Carlos Sainz. You saw that, yeah? What are your thoughts on whether or not Carlos had an opportunity to get out of that? Like, do you think it was not intentional, but do you think he was at fault?
No, I don't think he's at fault. Yeah, he maybe went a little bit too close to Piastri, but I believe he had a car beside him as well, and it could have been avoided, but I think it was just a racing incident, to tell you the truth. It definitely was not intentional. It just, maybe he didn't check his mirrors. Maybe Piastri expect him not to do that. So I'm just going to say it's a racing incident, and it was unintentional.
I think he did fuck up. There was enough.
Why?
When I looked at it, they had like an overview with the vertical on it, and like, you're 100% right. There was someone else, I can't remember who it was, but on the outside. So like, he did have to pull into the inside, but like, he went over a whole other lane. And so like, I'd argue that if he didn't go over as far, Oscar wouldn't have got pushed into the corner there on turn 1. That being said, do you think Oscar could have pulled back a little bit, or do you think he was too deep into that corner already to pull out of it? Because like, that to me, Unfortunately, it was the first corner of the first lap, but that was one of the most interesting parts about this race.
Yeah. Obviously, it's hard to say. We're obviously not at the driver's seat, so you could speculate. Yeah, he had time, or no, he was already too far gone. I think he took the risk. He probably could have pulled back, but I think he took a calculated risk, and it did not pay off. And what happened, and racing incident. He it was either gonna pay off or it's gonna fuck his race up, and unfortunately, fucked his race up.
So, speaking of McLaren and pulling off moves, what do you think about McLaren and their downforce choice this weekend?
It wasn't bad, to put it. I think it was pretty decent. They did a decent job. They had the speed. They were pretty good in corners. I think overall was a decent setup under downforce. Why? What do you think?
Because to me, they made a gamble. Like, they picked a higher downforce car for this weekend, assuming it was going to rain, and they weren't wrong. Like, if you looked at all the weather forecasts for it, they were predicting rain for race day. And when you saw them in the sprint race, when it was raining, they murdered it. They were absolutely fantastic. But then, like, I watched Lando like fall down the order the entire time, and like he wasn't giving up any spots. Like, he was fighting everyone on the way by. But as soon as it started to rain a little bit, then you see Lando's lap times increase exponentially. Like, he was in his own class. And so like, I think they rolled the risk on it and like put a high downforce car, because like it did appear much better, especially on the Saturday in the sprint quali and in the sprint race. It played out for them, and they took the gamble, and I don't think it paid off. If it did rain, I think they would have looked like fucking rock stars, dude. I think they would have absolutely smashed it, because they had a really good chance at winning if that strategy played out. That being said, what did you think of everybody's play based on what the sprint race weekend looks like? So because Friday is the quali for Sunday, they really only had FP1. And FP1, if you watched it, got totally pooched. They only had 30 minutes of FP1, which means they have no data for Saturday's sprint shootout. They have no data for the Saturday sprint, which means they have very little data for Sunday because it was dry. Do you think that the sprint race weekend style setup is conducive for the race on Sunday?
Me personally, I like the spring race setup. I hope there's actually a little bit more of them. It's a little bit of a variety. It's like we get a mini, like I think you said that as well, a mini Grand Prix before the actual GP. And I think we discussed this as well. They get, they get a pretty good idea of how the cars are going to perform in the GP under what conditions. So I don't. If your question is, do you think it kind of takes away as well from the actual GP? No, it doesn't. I think they continue to have more of those sprints, and I honestly prefer the sprints and the sprint shootouts over qualies. Me personally, I think that's a better data gathering tool as well.
Okay, so let's wrap that part up, because I do want to talk about one team that stood out to me, and I don't know if this is something to celebrate, but Ferrari actually pulling out a weekend where they made absolutely no mistakes. What do you think Ferrari's chances are at pulling off a decent constructors title shot? Well, obviously not a title shot, because Red Bull's pretty much already got that in the bag. But what do you think Ferrari's chances are at like competing for that second shot? Because now you have Aston Martin, you have Mercedes, and well, now you have McLaren up in the mix. Do you think Ferrari, if they keep on the way they're going, have a shot at it?
Knowing Ferrari, no, because it's Ferrari. just to put it that way. Deep down, I wish that they would have a shot, but I just don't see it. Yeah, this was one weekend where they didn't have any fuck ups. Wow, like that's huge, impressive. good job, Ferrari. Here's a gold star for you. Hopefully we get to see more of them. But no, they're gonna fuck it up. Unfortunately, I don't wish that upon them. I really hope they wouldn't. But from what history has shown us, there's a good chance that it is gonna happen. Those are my thoughts. What do you think in regards to that?
You know what, Ferrari? I think if Ferrari makes the right management calls as far as strategy is concerned, I think they have a decent car. Like, I think that car is looking okay on different types of tracks, which is a very difficult thing to do. And I think they've achieved that. I think both of the drivers have settled into this car quite well, despite obviously Carlos bashing into Piastri on the first lap. Take that out of it. I think they were actually doing okay this weekend. And Chuckles LeBuckles had a great race. We saw Ferrari on the podium, which has been a long time since that happened. And I think that it's an opportunity for Ferrari to kind of come back strong. And I would love to see them in the mix, because at this point in the season, Max and Red Bull have run away with it. It's already done. So ultimately, what the fans and I'm watching for, at least, is that second place, right? Like, that's where the action is as far as I'm concerned. And I'd love to see more people in the ring as far as that. What do you think about... All right, let me ask you this. What was your favorite team radio call for this weekend? Because we had a couple of juicy ones. They were actually pretty good. And I think Max and GP fucking lit it up. What was your favorite Max quote for the weekend?
I was going to say that when Max went at it with his race engineer, they're like an old, basically, I'm pretty sure, as Christian Horner said, they're basically like an old married couple, I found out pretty funny and entertaining, because you hear Max like that bickering and arguing. So that was my favorite call.
I think from my understanding, GP and Max have been like, that's his only race engineer since he started racing. Yeah. Like, they have one of these, like, yeah, Christian's right. I think it's more like, it's definitely a funny relationship. I don't know if it's an old married couple. I think it's more of like a brotherly thing, like an older brother, like they're talking shit, but like ultimately they know that like they have each other's best interest at heart. And I thought it was kind of entertaining that like they were going back and forth, and like, when Max almost got out in quality or sprint shootout, when he almost got out, he was like 1/10 of a second away from being out in SQ1. I think that it was, GP came back on the radio and was like, "That's why I told you to do that, Max. And if you listen to me, we wouldn't be in this situation. And now you have to do it." And there's another. Well, obviously, and then he had the other time where he was asking him to come in and pit to slow down on the tires. That's what he was asking him to do. He's like, yeah, ease up a little bit on the tires. We need to make these last till the end of the race. And he didn't. And then Max was like, you know what? Should I speed up and just give these guys another shot at another pit stop, do a little pit stop training? How fucking cheeky is that? Like, how much he doesn't even seem phased. Like, he's not out of breath. He's not anything. He's talking like you and I are right now, which is blowing my mind, where all these other guys are still trying, still racing. And he's so far ahead that he has time to think of jokes and other things, side quests that he has going on in the race. And that, to me, just exemplifies how far ahead Red Bull is from everybody else, which brings me to my next point. This week, I heard that the FIA was introducing an ability for the teams to test each other's engines. And if an engine is plus minus 3% away from the other fastest engine by the same manufacturer, that they are allowed to get information about it. What are your thoughts on like engine homogenization?
No. I read that article about it as well. It rewards, quote unquote, shittier teams. If let's say Red Bull has the dominant engine, or I think Red Bull's engine supplier is Ford, I think right now. Honda. They have. Is it Honda? I thought it was Ford.
No, Red Bull's got Honda. There's no Ford yet.
Really?
Anyways,
promise. I thought that partnership was discontinued. Anyways, if let's say Red Bull has the better engine, which is Honda, and Haas has a Ferrari engine and it's shittier or slower, by that margin, I don't think they should have access to look at the data and what's different. that's rewarding the worser team. I think it's not going to be fair to the top teams. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it more equal, but it's going to become kind of like a NASCAR style sport, and it's going to become a little bit boring, I think, in my eyes. Everything's going to be too much the same. They're going to start introducing, or they already are talking about it, some cars sharing the same aero parts or same designs, again, in cost cutting caps and all that stuff. They're talking about innovation, and everything's going to become so similar that it's not, from my eyes, it's not going to be interesting to watch it as a sport anymore.
I have mixed feelings about it. I'm with you on that. I think that there's an opportunity for the FIA to bring the sport back, to close up that pack a little bit. Like, I get what they're trying to do, and I know that's what you're mentioning. Like, we understand the concept of what they're trying to do, and you're right. I think they're trying to bring in some aero parts. I know they're trying to bring in some brake ducting and stuff like that to make that, like, the same for everybody across the grid, and that's to help with the dirty air and all that kind of stuff. And I get that, and I think that there's currently a lot of parts on the car that are synonymous around the grid. But I think to not reward teams for trying to be better, you're just going to stop the innovation. Yeah. Like, no one's going to want to be better, because if you get better, then that, the guy who's behind you not doing any work is just going to, leech off everything that you've done as far as getting better, getting faster, working harder. And they're just gonna be like, let's just wait for them to get better so that we get their information and data and figure out how to make these upgrades in order to compete. And I just think that that's going to crush the innovation at the expense of the sport long term.
I agree.
And there's a lot of other parts. There's a lot of moving parts of this. Every pun intended on that. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to building a car, and I think that the engine's just one of them. There's going to be a lot of things. The aero package is another huge portion of it, and just understanding that, like, the cars are going to be different. Like, you have the same engine manufacturers for many of these teams, and there's still a huge gap in that. So it's taking everybody with an apples to apples and seeing what they can do to make that better. And if you're not going to reward the best guys, then, like, why bother? What are we doing here? We might as well just go to a spec car series, like you said, with the Indy or something like that, right? And there's room for that in motorsport. I think that spec cars are fine, but that's not what Formula One is. It's not what it has been, and I don't think that's where it should go. Okay, so I guess my next question for you is, what do you think is going to happen for the summer break as far as Alpine is concerned? They've made a couple of big moves. I don't know if you're aware with that. I'm assuming you are aware of what Alpine's been popping off. And do you think Alpine is going to make some moves for picking up or replacing any of the guys that they have canned over the last couple of weeks?
It's so hard to say what the fuck is going on at Alpine, because it's such a fucking mess, and it has been a mess since it was Renault as well. Their 100 race plan or something like that, when Cyril was there, then Prost was there, then Otmar was there, and they don't have a concrete answer to what that plan is, and everything's in the air right now. So yeah, I think it's gonna get, they're gonna get replaced by someone. But I don't know what they're like, almost Ferrari number 2 in a shittier way. They're firing all their top guys, and they don't even know their own plan or their own strategy. In my eyes, they have 2 good, talented drivers right now. That's what they have going for them. They have a pretty decent car, but they have no plan.
What a waste!
What a waste! A very big waste. Yes,
like, those are 2 super solid drivers. Are they, forever legacy rock star drivers like a Max Verstappen, like a Lewis Hamilton? No. But are they very competitive, top of the grid drivers in the absolute shittiest car on the grid? Hands down. And I think that's such a waste of talent. And I would argue that those 2 are the 2 of the most understated drivers on the grid, and they happen to both be with the shittiest team. And it's too bad, because I think Alpine, has a good shtick going for them right now with the whole Ryan Reynolds thing, getting bought out, getting a little bit of, social clout. Do you think maybe this is part of that? Like, part of, like, just like a whole rebrand, regroup, like, let's start from the bottom, like a hockey team, like a football team, when it's time to just, like, we're redoing this again. Let's have a few years as a rebuild phase.
Good question. I haven't thought about that, but with Ryan Reynolds stepping in and buying a big share, yeah, that could have something to do with it. Maybe he wants to bring in his own people or had a say, maybe in regards to something like that. But again, it's so wasteful what's happening right now. They have no clear plan, no clear goal, and who knows what's going to happen. And it sucks to see Ocon and Gasly right now in that team because, like you said, they're talented drivers. They have a lot to offer, and it's a mess right now there. So I'm not too sure where it's going to go. It's either going to pick up and go forward, or is going to start falling back down again.
Okay, brings me to my next point. What do you think is happening with Checo? Like, is this his comeback? Like, is he done his full rebound? Are we looking at the Checo that we needed to see all year? Or do you think his seat's still up for grabs at the end of the year? Because we talked about that on the last couple of podcasts, because he's been pulling up duds for a bunch. He's redeemed himself in the last, let's call it race and a half or whatever you want to call this. He's definitely made some moves, lands on the podium. You know what I mean? Like, he's doing okay. He's doing everything he needs to do. Do you think Red Bull is still making moves towards replacing him? Because it looked very much like that, especially when they put Danny Rick into that AlphaTauri seat.
I was gonna say too early to tell yet, but I'm pretty sure Checo still has not proved himself. So yeah, for the time being, I still think they're keeping their options open, considering what we both know, from Red Bull and AlphaTauri, how they work. They're still keeping their options open, and the Checo's fate is not set in stone yet. But if he performs shitty or not up to their expectations, yeah, 100%, he's going to get replaced. Not sure by who yet. No one is. But these next, after summer break, he needs to come back strong and be willing to, to at least try to challenge Max. Try to not really follow team orders. I guess if he has a chance, he kind of has to be his own man and just go for it. Because if he keeps on repeating the same shit that has been going on, he's going to be out of his seat. Simple as that. That's my opinion.
Do you think that those guys are racing the same car? Do you think Max and Checo are racing the same car? Because I know that Christian Horner's been saying it very loudly that, like, oh, they're in the same car. They're in the same car. And now that Checo's not crashing or, like, pulling up bullshit, and he's actually staying on track for the whole race, and Max is 30 seconds out in front, do you really think that they're both in the same car? Because I don't.
I had doubts that they might not be in the same car, but one key moment of this GP erased those doubts, and that's when Max was gaining on Checo in the last corner, I think, before he overtook Checo. You could just, and it was view from, I think, from the cockpit or his helmet cam or something, just the way he was braking later, taking the corner earlier, and how he was just catching Checo. I knew Max was a talented driver, but when I saw that firsthand, I was like, holy shit, that's when it really set into me personally. I'm like, holy shit, like, that's some fucking major skill. Just the way he caught up to Checo just like that, and yeah, and it erased, literally that moment erased all doubts. They're in the same car. Max has the skill, and Checo doesn't have that skill yet. It's not on par. Now, my question to you is, why do you think they're not in the same car?
For the exact same reason you did. I think that there's no way that Max Verstappen is a second and a quarter faster per lap. It's just not happening. Like, I don't remember exactly when, and I don't have the data in front of me, but when Max passed Checo, it was probably, a third of the way through the race?
Yeah.
Okay, at 70 laps, let's call it, 30, let's call it 22, 25 laps into the race is when Max passes Checo. So from there till the end, let's call it another 30 laps for round numbers. Do you think he's putting in a second a lap faster than Checo on pure skill alone? A second. That's a lot, man.
That's a lot, and that's a fair point.
Like
I
I
don't
just
know.
don't.
But
Yeah. Like okay, so Max is running at 100 and Checo's running at 90. Let's say just in driver skill, right? I don't know if that 10% difference is a second a lap though. Like I think there's something going on with his car. Like, do you think that it was like a setup that they dialed in, or they have something that's just like, I just personally, as a blanket statement, I honestly don't think that Checo and Max are in the same car. I think Max has got something going on there that is helping him just stay in the lead. And I think if Checo jumped into Max's car, do the old blindfold switcheroo, I think Checo would be showing up to bat a little bit faster if he knew how to drive the car. It might be, totally positioned and fitted for Max, but like, I just, I can't, I have a hard time believing that Checo and Max are in the exact same car for that reason.
you know what? It very much could be. Another thought process of mine is, especially when you see them both, when Max overtook Checo, it seemed like Checo's running, let's say, at 85% power and Max is running at a full 100%. It's almost like Checo's car is, for the exact same reason, it's like almost like detuned. Like Max's car is tuned to go faster. And I noticed that too, not just this race, but previous races, just the way he accelerates. It's almost like, when you're playing a video game, you hit nitrous or a boost and he just gets that speed boost. And it's like, to me, I can't wrap my brain and my head around that. Something to me seems off in regards to that as well. And I do remember, I'm not sure if you saw an article, one of the teams, I think, submitted a request to the FIA to basically investigate Red Bull, because specifically, I think Max's car, just because how fast it is and how it dominates everyone else. So I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to investigate or not, but things might get pretty spicy.
I agree, and I can't remember where I saw or read that, but I can imagine that all the teams are kind of asking the same question, because I know Mercedes, I know Toto is probably losing his mind right now, being like, how are they just that much better? Which is fine, and honestly, I don't think Red Bull's cheating. I don't think they have an ace in their pocket, and that's called Adrian Newey. And he's been doing this for a long fucking time. And he has been the best for a long time. And I think he just has the gift. And I don't think that, my question is whether or not Max is dominating because of his skill. I just think his car is better than Checo's, which brings me to my next point. Do you think if someone like Oscar Piastri had a chance, or do you think if Red Bull had a chance to pick up someone like Oscar Piastri, that they would do it?
I don't know. I don't know much about Oscar for the time being. The last few races, he performed really, really well and definitely stood out as well. I know you mentioned it. They kind of wanted to pick him up early days, and they passed him because of Checo, and they might be kicking themselves in the foot. Red Bull knows what they're doing. I don't think they made a mistake with Piastri. I think for the time being, they saw Checo as a better option, better fit, and that's what they went with. But if Checo ends up leaving or gets kicked out and they put Piastri in the seat, things could be very, very interesting. Because he's, as you said, he's kind of cool-headed and calm, and he could get on Max's nerve if he has that drive and that passion to win and succeed. So
I think he would be a disruptor. I think he would be that disruptor, like that kid who's like, just fast enough. He's so early on in his career that I don't think he doesn't have that I'm going to be a second seat for the rest of my career kind of attitude. And I think he's fast enough with a big enough skill set that if he got into that Red Bull car, that I would love to see what kind of pressure he put on Max. And even Lewis said over the weekend in an interview after the race, said like, yeah, I'd love to be in a Red Bull. I'd love to be in that car. And I promise you that Max would not be having as much fun if I was in Checo's seat. And I love that quote because, you know what, I don't think he's wrong. I think if somebody else got in that seat, that would, cause problems at Red Bull. And fortunately or unfortunately for Red Bull, they are stuck with Max until 2028. So they put all their eggs in one basket. Like they bet their entire franchise on that kid. And I don't think that they're going to be willing to disrupt that, even to get the next generation driver. Because I think that Piastri is going to be that next generation driver. Because deep down inside, I honestly think that like Max is going to get sick of winning. I think he loves motorsport as a whole. And I think much like, Fernando Alonso did, he's going to retire after a couple of championships, just like Fernando did. He's going to jump into Le Mans. He's going to jump into, other GP categories. And he's going to do these 24-hour drives or, 1 week drives across Africa and all that crazy shit that Fernando Alonso did, because he loves motorsport through and through. And I just think that there's an opportunity there for Red Bull to kind of hedge their bets a little bit, because they got everything in the Max Verstappen bin. Like they are all in there. And I think if he ends up departing early, that they don't have a second shot. There's what do you think? Checo's going to step up to bat and be the best driver? Look what's happened right now. If there was no Max Verstappen, do you think Red Bull would be where they are? Not a chance in hell. Not a fucking chance in hell.
The thing is, though, I think Max said that too, or Fernando even said it. It's great that Max keeps on winning, and but I think at the same time, he's gonna start that fire, that passion is gonna start slowly burning out because there's no challenge for him. So being a minute or being 30 seconds ahead of the second guy, cool once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. But if you keep doing this year after year, I'm sorry, I would get tired of this. Where's the challenge, But the flip side of the coin is if, let's say Max would be in Checo's position and he's struggling, the same fire, the same passion would probably burn out as well, because you can't keep up. You might be doing everything you can to keep up or beat your teammate, and you just can't get it together, whether it's your skill or your car. And that's debatable. His flame might go out as well, or it might ignite him more and just wants to continue pushing it on. But for Max, it's a scary position to be in for the time being. It's 2023, and he has another 5 years with Red Bull. If 5 years continue going that way, man, he's just going to get tired. And I think once he gets tired, he's either probably going to retire, because, you're at Red Bull. You're at the top team. Where are you going to go? You're not going to go to, Ferrari or Mercedes or some other team, because why would you, right? You're at the top team. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And, maybe he likes winning all these races and having no challenge, but who would, eventually would get tired and you want a challenge. It's like having a cheat code every race. First.
I'm with you on that. You know what? I'm going to ask you this then. Who do you think coming after the summer break, what team or driver do you think is the one to watch going forward? Let's take Max and Red Bull out of this. We assume that they've won it. They're going to keep winning it. Who do you think is going to be the hot shots coming out of the summer break?
I was going to say Checo. It would be a guy to watch for, but if we're taking Red Bull out, McLaren, I would say, and McLaren, both Lando and Piastri, those are the 2 guys to watch out for. They've been just on their game lately. I think there's going to be more interesting things coming from them, and hopefully more podiums from both of them. Another guy, Danny Rick. I would want to see him back on the podium, and last race wasn't the greatest race for him, but the race before that, he did pretty well. He beat Yuki. So those would be my picks.
Question for you: Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri? If I told you who's the best driver or who's the one to watch out of McLaren?
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't like either of them at first.
No way.
Yeah, who would have thought?
You've openly hated on those guys for the entire season.
But now with time, I got to like Lando as a driver and his skill. Piastri, I seen his skill. I still don't really like him as a driver, so I'm going to go with Lando just for that reason.
All right. And what do you think about Aston Martin? Like, are they just gone? Because we were talking about Aston Martin every single podcast, because every single race they were surprising us, bringing us absolute fire race after race. You know, Alonso saying that, like, oh, well, we're going to be on the podium for the rest of the season. He got pretty quiet. Aston Martin got even quieter. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they're coming back?
They're still in the points, so let's give them that, first of all. Could they do better? Fuck yeah, they could do better. Why did it go quiet? I think they just made some wrong moves in regards to upgrades, because at first the car seemed so much more competitive, and after those upgrades it kind of went downhill. We both know it's not the drivers. You know, Fernando has tons of experience. Stroll, you know, he's been doing decent, I'd say. The cars are just not really competitive anymore, and I don't know if they're not tuned properly, or they need some adjustments, but they're just not really competing with the rest of the grid. Yeah, they're still in the points, but just barely.
I think they were coming in pretty hot. I think after, you know, at the start of the season, they had spent a ton of money and a lot of time coming up with this car, and I think it was fantastic. I personally just don't think that they've been bringing the upgrades necessary. Everybody else is taking 2 steps ahead every race, and they're only taking 1. And eventually that gap becomes much more obvious. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is that obvious gap where everybody else, and like, look at the leaps and bounds McLaren's made in the last 3 races. Unbelievable. And if everything remains constant, I think McLaren's going to surpass Aston Martin. I think Ferrari's absolutely in the mix. And I'd love to see Danny Rick do some great things and really compete against Yuki coming out of the summer break. But I am going to wrap it up here. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we enter the summer break? And don't worry, everybody, we will still be putting out podcasts. We're going to have our homeboy Ed back. He's going to be yamming on about God knows what, because I know his heart palpitations are coming back strong. So we'll figure out a topic and get somebody talking on that. But did you have anything you wanted to mention, Thomas, before we wrap this ditty up?
Tears for Trophies episode 2, a second trophy freaking breaks again. Like, come on, what kind of luck for Red Bull is that?
Is it luck, or is it just the fact that they have so many goddamn trophies that they actually just don't care anymore? That they're just like,
Probably.
Whatever, we don't even care. You know what I mean? Like, it's like when you have like a pair of shoes. It's just like, I got so many pairs of shoes, I don't care if I step in the mud anymore. It's just like, I got more, and they know they got more coming.
Like, it could be, yeah, it's like, oh, I won an Emmy. All right, this one broke, no problem, I'll have one next week, you know? Yeah, I think it's getting to that point.
Did you shed any tears for this trophy?
Actually, no, I found this one pretty funny, actually. I found it funny that Max's reaction, he's like, come on, another one? that was pretty funny.
And that's how I think you should have reacted to the first one. But you got so ass hurt, dude. It blew my mind. However, on the flip side, I did not laugh any harder. The first one was different because we had 70 nuns with their really small hands painting this goddamn... You know what? No, I'm shutting this down here before we get talking about it. Thank you, everybody, for anyone who's still listening. I appreciate it. If there's any teams out there still listening, we'll take keychains. We'll take shitty Alfa Romeo hats. We'll take whatever the hell anyone's willing to give us. Thank you. You can find us on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you can find your podcast. If you're listening to this,
YouTube.
You know how to find us anyway. YouTube. Yeah, don't forget the YouTube channel. Also, the link is in the description, but please hit up the Discord. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, give us a 5-star rating, all that good stuff. You know what it is. Shout out to my homeboys. We got Ed doing his thing, and we got Walker all the way out in Austria, wishing him safe travels. Thomas in the bunker. Love you, buddy. Ciao, my man.
See ya. Good one.